If anyone is joining us on Microsoft Teams, please keep yourself muted and your camera off, and then turn your camera on. Remember to unmute yourself when you are speaking. And with that, I'll call the May 7th, 2024 Public Hearing Committee meeting to order, and note that all members of council are present today. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Okay, seeing none, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented. Moved by Councillor Micheli, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All in favor? Carried. And with that, I will officially open the public meeting held under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and County Policy. Please be advised that to preserve your right to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, you are required to make a comment or provide a written submission prior to the passage of a bylaw. You should note that these meetings today are to allow the public to provide initial comments on planning matters and no decisions are made. First item on the agenda is item 4.1, CD 24050, which is an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 50 Alice Street, Waterford. Mr. Sloan?
Thank you and good afternoon. So these first agenda item on the land use amendments in the central area of Waterford, we have Andrew Wallace is here to provide the overview. So over to Andrew.
Thank you, Brandon. Through the Mayor, this application seeks both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment in order to return the building to a fully residential use. This is largely a straightforward administrative process which requires a limited level of supporting information. There are no physical changes to the site as proposed. The existing parking would be retained, and the proposal aligns with the intent and purpose of the official plan and the zoning bylaws. Next slide, please. 50 Alice Street is a detached building on the southern side of Alice Street within the central business district of Waterford. The area is designated downtown in the official plan. As shown in the slide, the site is approximately 1,230 square meters in area on an interior lot located approximately halfway between Aughty Street and St. James Street South. Next slide, please. 50 Alice is a detached two-story building which has been divided into apartments, with a single unit on the ground floor having been converted to commercial space more than 20 years ago. Prior to this, the entire building was in residential use. There is a single detached dwelling to the east and a commercial property to the west. The building is decidedly residential in appearance and character. Whilst within the CBD zone, there are 7 existing parking spaces to the rear of the building, which would be retained. The area is otherwise largely in commercial use. Next slide. The applicants seek both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for the use of the building for fully residential purposes, as I mentioned. This is not included in the provisions of either the official plan nor the zoning bylaws. However, the official plan does allow for fully residential use in buildings within the downtown designation, which are of a residential character and appearance. The zoning bylaws would require any building within the CBD to have a minimum of 50% of the ground floor area in commercial use. The existing ground floor commercial use is less than 1/4 of the ground floor area and was formed in a former apartment which made use of the front door. As such, the applicants seek special provisions to allow for the wholly residential use of the building within the downtown designation and the CBD zone. Next slide, please. The technical comments received prior to the submission of the report to clerks has been provided and are contained within your reports. By way of an update, comments have since been received from Development Engineering. They've commented on the need for all reports and drawings and for permits will need to be signed and stamped by a professional engineer. They raise no other concerns. We've also received comments from the fire department who noted that due to the nature of this request, we assume that a change of use permit will be required, and as such, and compensating construction will capture smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, fire separation requirements under the building code. I have provided copies of both of these to you under the addendum to attachment C. Since the report was sent to clerks, I have been contacted by telephone by one member of the public directly. and by the ward member seeking clarification for her constituents. No objections have been put forward to the proposal prior to this meeting. Next slide, please. Considerations at this time can be given to the need for more affordable rental units, provision or retention of the existing parking, and the convenient location within the town center. And the final slide, please. To conclude, the proposal is for both an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment to allow wholly residential use within the existing building. This proposal would exceed parking requirements and would not result in any zoning deficiencies. To conclude, staff recommend that staff report CD 24050 for development applications OPNPL 2024063 and ZNPL 2024064 be received for information, and that any comments received at this meeting shall be considered in the future recommendation staff report. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Questions of committee? I have one for you, Councillor Huffman. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot, but the former term of council, we did a rezone on a commercial on the ground floor. Was it in close proximity to this one, from residential to?
Fairly close. This one has been used as a business for the last number of years, and they're no longer going to be using it for the business. So it lends itself very nicely, actually, to being into a residential piece. It looks like it's a house. It's not like a business front or anything like that. So it's a little bit different than the last time we did that.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So no question. Is there anyone here in council chambers that wishes to speak to this report? Is there anyone on the line that wishes to speak to this report? And final call. Okay, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for, go ahead, Councillor Van Passen.
Yeah, sorry, Madam Chair. I do have one question. The way the bylaw is written, it says that the residential shall be permitted in the whole floor. Does that mean that in 10 years, if the owner changes their mind and want to revert one unit back to commercial, that they would be allowed to do that without reapplying, since the wording is such?
Through Madam Mayor, the existing zone CBD permits commercial. It applies to any developments, even if it is residential in this area within the CBD. So they are permitted to use as commercial.
That's just the difference between the word shall and may, right? So, but it's the way it's worded, it says shall be permitted, so that doesn't take away the option later on to put commercial back into it, right?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, we'll put that as a note, and we'll review that for the recommendation.
Okay, mover and a seconder to receive this report as information. Moved by committee member Van Andrieschie, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item 4.2, CD 24038, zoning bylaw amendment for 151 Highway 6. Mr. Sloan.
Yes, thank you. I believe for this rezoning, we have Hannah that's on the line that could call up the presentation and provide the overview. So I'll turn it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Brandon. Just one moment and I'll do that. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So thank you all. An application has been received to amend the zoning bylaw affecting 151 Highway 6. This is a privately serviced lot that is located on the northwestern corner of the intersection of Port Raracy Road and Highway 6. Having an approximate area of 7.8 acres, it is currently occupied by a landscaping business. The surrounding area and rear of the subject lands are agricultural in nature with limited residential lots to the east. The subject lands are designated agricultural and zoned rural industrial, which is subject to site plan control. In terms of the property's historical planning context, it has been the subject of an earlier zoning bylaw amendment, file number ZNPL 2013-015, and boundary adjustment BNPL 2013-016, which sought to amend the zone from rural industrial to agricultural in order to transfer a 0.27 acre parcel of land to an abutting residential parcel to the east having civic address 459 Port Raracy Road. The application presented today is essentially aiming to complete the same goal. It proposes to rezone a portion of the subject lands from rural industrial to agricultural in order to satisfy a condition of approval for a preceding boundary adjustment application, BNPL 2022-150, which sought the transfer of a 0.3 acre parcel to the abutting residential parcel, again having the address 459 Port Raracy Road. Due to the nature of this proposal, no technical reports were required for the submission, and at this time, no technical comments or concerns from the public have been identified. Some preliminary considerations associated with this application are the land use and lot creation lot adjustment policies for the agricultural area, the relevant requirements pertaining to the transition of lands from industrial use to residential use, and the potential implications for jobs or employment. Next steps for staff are the consideration of feedback received at this public hearing meeting, the review of any technical comments received, and preparation of a recommendation report. Thank you all for your time, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Okay, seeing none, staff recommendation to receive CD 24038 for development application ZNPL 2024-067 to be received as information, and that any comments received as part of the statutory public meeting be considered in a future recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is anyone in, I just assumed they weren't. Is anyone here to speak to this file today? My apologies. Is anyone on the line? Okay. Is there a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Huffman. Second by Councillor Duthie. Good catch. All in favor? Carried. Item 4.3, CD 24051 zoning bylaw amendment for 77 to 79 Oakwood Avenue, Simcoe.
And we'll turn it back over to Mr. Wallace to provide the overview of this next application. Andrew?
Thank you, Brandon. Through the mayor, this application seeks a zoning bylaw amendment in order to add uses to the site which are permitted under the official plan. This is a largely straightforward administrative process which required a limited level of supporting information. There are no external physical changes to the site as proposed, and the proposal aligns with the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaws. For clarification, given the report was submitted prior to the site notice posting, I would like to confirm that the site notice was posted on April 17th. Next slide, please. 77 to 79 Oakwood Avenue is a two-story duplex located within Simcoe. As shown in the slide, the site is approximately 623 square meters in area, an interior lot, and located on the northern side of Oakwood Avenue. It is in a predominantly residential neighborhood within approximately 1 kilometer of Fanshawe College. Next slide, please. The subject lands are within the urban residential designation of the official plan and the R2 zone of the zoning bylaws. Oakwood Avenue and the adjacent section of Ashton Drive are characterized by semi-detached dwellings and duplexes, generally 2 stories in height. The majority of properties have off-street parking for up to 3 vehicles. Oakwood Avenue has a large proportion of houses in private ownership, mixed with some low-income housing managed by Haldeman Norfolk Housing Corporation. Next slide, please. The application seeks a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for the use of the site as a boarding house or a rooming house. These two uses are not included in the zoning provisions for residential type 2. The application would seek an amendment to the current R2 zoning to include a special provision which would allow for the following. Use of the building as a boarding or lodging house or a rooming house, reduction in the required parking provision for such a use. The zoning for a rooming house, boarding house would require 12 parking spaces between these two units. The application seeks to provide 6 parking spaces. And any setback deficiencies created through the additional uses shall be deemed to comply. Next slide, please. The technical comments have been provided and are contained within your report packs. I would draw your attention to the development engineering comments, which state that no additional water sewage capacity is required for the proposed use. Since the report was sent to clerks, there has been an additional public comment, which was too late to include in attachment D. I have provided you with a copy of this email. There have also been several phone calls to me seeking further clarification of the proposed use, but after discussion, there were no specific objections raised. Next slide, please. Considerations at this time can be given to the need for this form of housing or accommodation within Norfolk for affordable housing, whether the reduced off-street parking provision would be appropriate in this area and given the proposed end users of this site, and that the proposal would require no changes to the servicing of this site, but may result in some minor deficiencies in terms of zoning bylaw compliance. Last slide, please. To conclude, the proposal is for a zoning bylaw amendment to allow additional uses within the existing R2 zone to allow for a boarding or lodging or rooming house. This proposal would provide reduced parking and setbacks than would be required in the zoning bylaws for these additional uses. To conclude, staff recommend that staff report CD 24051 for development application ZNPL 2024-072 be received for information, and that any comments received at this meeting shall be considered in the future recommendation staff report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from council? Seeing none. Is there anyone here in the in attendance that wishes to speak? Come on up to the podium. Right here. We'll get you to state your name for the public record, and there's a button on the right-hand side there that'll turn it on. Just state your name for the public record, and then you can go ahead.
Okay, I'm Carrie Flint. Okay, first I wanted to confirm it's the right, I know what it is. It's like right across from the park. And I saw it in the news. Is it the home that you're planning on putting drug addicts in? Because it was in the news, because that is what our whole neighborhood has petitioned against, and that is why I'm here.
Okay, first of all, the answer is no. Second of all, this is an opportunity for you to just share your comments and concerns and questions. So give us your whole spiel.
Okay,
and
well, it was so, everything he mentioned on there was everything opposite of what was in the letter before and on the news.
Separate location.
Okay.
Different location entirely.
Okay, well, that's all I have to say then.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
All right.
Anyone else wish to come and speak on the public record? Is there anyone on the line that wishes to speak? Final call, anyone else? Okay, with that, there is a staff recommendation before us today, which Andrew read out, so I won't reread. Is there a mover and a seconder for that? Moved by Councillor Berry, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is item 4.4, CD 24047, temporary use bylaw, ZNPL 2024-008 to ZNPL 2024-009 and ZNPL 2024-010, multiple properties. Mr. Sloan.
Yes, thanks. Just want to take the opportunity to welcome one of our planners, Kendall, who I believe is making a first appearance for development files at Public Hearing Committee, and she can provide a brief overview of the last agenda item. That's a series of temporary use zoning extensions, and they could be subject to delegated approval authority for our streamlined process. And turn it over to Kendall.
Thanks, Brandon. Through the mayor, these three applications seek extensions for the existing temporary use zoning bylaws that apply to each property to permit the continued use of existing garden suites. The approval of temporary use zoning bylaws is done through a delegated authority by the Director of Planning or designate. There are no changes to any of these sites, both physically or in terms of their use. Next slide, please. The first file number, ZNPL 2024-008, pertains to 145 Teeter Street in Teeterville. This property is zoned Hamlet Residential and designated as Hamlet under the official plan. The site is approximately 0.61 hectares with frontage onto Teeter Street and contains a single detached dwelling, a detached garage, and the existing garden suite. Next slide. The second file number, ZNPL 2024-009, pertains to 275 Norfolk County Road 13. This property is zoned and designated primarily as agricultural. It is approximately 3.38 hectares with frontage onto Norfolk County Road 13 and contains a single detached dwelling, a detached shop, a detached barn, and the existing garden suite. Next slide, please. The third and final file number, ZMPL 2024-010, pertains to 316 Charlottesville West Quarterline Road, just north of the hamlet of Forestville. This property is zoned rural, industrial, hazard lands, and provincially significant wetlands, and is designated as agricultural, hazard lands, and provincially significant wetlands under the official plan. The site is approximately 11.35 hectares and contains a single detached dwelling, various outbuildings, and the existing garden suite, which is located within the agriculturally designated portion, designated and zoned portion of the property. Next slide, please. Sorry. These applications are being considered to allow for the extension of temporary use bylaws to permit the continued use of the garden suites on the subject property. They would each remain as they are currently zoned with the temporary use bylaw extension to permit the continued use. Next slide, please. At this time, there have been no technical or public comments that have been received in regards to any of the three files. Next slide. Considerations at this time relate to the need for housing of this type on each of the subject properties. Each garden suite houses a relative of the property owner and would see no change in use or alterations to the site. Next slide. In conclusions, these proposals are for extensions of temporary use zoning bylaws to permit the continued use of existing garden suites for periods of 3 years. Staff recommends that staff report CD 24049 for development application ZNPL 2024-008, ZNPL 2024-009, and ZNPL 2024-010 be received for information, that any of the comments received at this meeting shall be considered as part of the decision process, and that the decision for these applications be made by the Director of Planning or designate through delegated approval as per bylaw 2022-106. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Questions? Councillor Van Passen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And might be a question for Brandon, more of the big picture. A few years ago, the province changed the rules on accessory dwelling units, and the county has changed it to fit that. Is there no way to sort of roll over these renewals of the garden suites and declare them sort of grandfathered in as accessory dwellings? Or, you know, is there a difference in the construction of an accessory dwelling to a garden suite? Or, like, I think some of these, they're a little bit bigger than what we would allow, or the distance is a little different. But couldn't we sort of just grandfather them in as legal non-conforming or something, even though it couldn't quite fit the zoning bylaw?
Yeah, through the chair, that's something that we did raise with these files of whether or not the proponents, the owners, would be looking at an ADU permission. Maybe I'll turn it back to the planning folks, because I think that has been pursued to look at. There may be some differences with where these might be located on the property, or the size, as you mentioned, or the type of construction versus the ADU permissions. But essentially, these type of properties can have more than one unit now. So having garden suites is is a little bit of the older way, but maybe planning staff have additional comments on that, because I know that's a topic we came up with.
You can't have both. You can't have a garden suite and an accessory dwelling unit. That's in our bylaw, right? So you get one or the other. And I know, well, at least one of these, it's a little bit, it's got a few extra square feet than what we would allow as an accessory dwelling unit. It's a few meters farther away than what we would allow. But I guess that's what I'm asking. Couldn't we look at some flexibility since they're existing and, you know, use that term of legal non-conforming and take away that need to renew them every 3 years and pay a lot of money to do that, because these applications are not cheap, right?
Through Madam Mayor, I can add some comments. Garden suites are basically designed for agricultural areas, not for urban setup. Historically, additional dwelling unit started with urban areas. Now it is extending to agricultural as well. And also, I think having a garden suite is, in addition to a provision for additional dwelling unit, provides some more flexibility to the owners in terms of size of the garden suites. And also, some owners might also want it temporary basis, which is the purpose of garden suite. Some owners do want to transfer garden suites to additional dwelling unit, and we did those conversions as well through minor variance or consent applications. We did that previously. So there are different ways and different opportunities available. I mean, for garden suites, it is more smaller in a scale and temporary in terms of structure. So if any owner wants to have those temporary structures with less cost, they may want to think about the garden suite. So I think having a garden suite gives them a more flexibility in what kind of development they want. They can still have additional dwelling unit if they want in an agricultural area now. So, and obviously the province is thinking to provide some more flexibility, and in terms of additional dwelling unit, which will probably is coming in future.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My understanding was from a long time ago that garden suites were put in place for family members who needed some extra help. And some of these garden suites, especially I know the one in Charlottesville or near St. Williams, it's been in place for more than 24 years. So how does our staff ensure that the same use is being made of that garden suite to assist another family member? Do we go through a series of questions, or do we visit the site, or can someone answer that to ensure that it's being put to use for what it was intended to be put to use for?
Through Madam Mayor, if I answer that question, we have the capability to visit the site once. I mean, generally what happens is once the expiry date comes to close, they ask for an extension, or if they don't ask for an extension, annually we review what are the garden suites which are close to the expiry date, and we contact them to provide options if they want to extend their expiry date, or they want to close the temporary use. And in that case, we do go and have a visit. I mean, from Planning Act requirements, we have certain deadlines. In our official plan also, we provided timeline. For garden suites, I believe it is 11 years maximum, and then extension of 3 years in every time if they want to extend it. And at that time, we can definitely we can visit and confirm that it is for the purpose that they submitted for.
And so do you ensure that the application, that the family that's supposed to be living in the garden suite is still the family that was originally there when the first application was made?
Through Madam Mayor, that probably would be difficult to confirm, We can visit the structure, and we can visit to see that whether the structure is there according to the requirements. I'm not sure if we can. I mean, at the time of the application, definitely we can confirm that what is the purpose of the use. It would be difficult to monitor in between who is using that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, not to be cheeky, but it's no different than when we discuss waiving permits from the Mayor's Affordability Roundtable. How can we tell who's going to live there? We can't, but we do these things anyways. Councillor Van Passen?
Since it was brought up, I can say that I did get a call from Mrs. G, who's lived in that house, who must be into her 90s, and she was not happy that she had to pay to reapply to stay there. So I can verify that one is still being used. So.
I agree. Like some of this going on. So just correct me if I'm wrong. When you initially apply, is it 10 years? 11.
Through Madam Mayor, up to 11 years.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Through the official policy, we have a requirement of up to 11 years. So it can be 5 years, but it can be maximum 11 years. Through Planning Act, it is the 20 years. So we are allowed to provide 20 years up to.
So who determined the 3 years as the renewal
Previously,
duration?
it was through the council. Now it is through the delegated. I mean, obviously, we'll have public hearing at that time.
No, I mean, who determined 3 years as the, not who determines if it goes ahead or not? Who determined that 3 years was a good duration? Why not 4 years? Why not 5 years? Why not another 11? Oh, microphone, sorry.
It depends on really the need of the host, right? So we do analyze their need and what is the reason for asking for the garden suites.
Okay, because I don't feel in particular with the third item that 3 years is enough, quite frankly. I think if people are spending money on it and time and staff are spending resources on it, that that need was not properly assessed in this particular situation.
Through Madam Mayor, again, the initial timeline is up to 11 years, and every time extension is 3 years. That's through the Planning Act. So Planning Act says that you can extend up to 3 years after the initial timeline that is provided.
And can council pick their own duration? Why can't it be more than that?
Through the chair, that's the Planning Act provision.
Through Madam Mayor, the Planning Act requires that the grant further periods of not more than 3 years.
So that would be staff's recommendation, but council can deviate from that.
So cannot deviate the Planning Act requirement. So 3 years, the temporary use will be extended. So it can be 20 years and then 3 years in each time of the extension.
Councillor Van Passen?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. No, I'm not sure I'm getting this. I thought it was 11 years, but does the Planning Act say it can be granted for a maximum of 20 years?
True, Madam Mayor. The first timing is 20 years, up to 20 years. You can have 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It depends how the council or how the council is deciding.
So we could implement that everyone is granted for 20 years, even if we add that we're going to review it after every 5 years to make sure that these same people are in there. We could grant them originally all for 20 years.
Correct.
So maybe that might be a policy change I could support if it was brought forward, you know, with a review after 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 to make sure the people that are supposed to be there are there. But why make the people fill out applications every 3 years and shell out that kind of money to renew them? So maybe we could ask staff to a little bit out of whack with this meeting, but I think that's the direction we might want to look at.
Yep.
No, I have a question. We've mentioned money several times, but how much money? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My last question is if it can go to 20 years, do you have the information in front of you how long it's been there for already?
Madam Mayor, can you repeat the question again?
If it's permitted to be there for 20 years, how long has certainly the Charlottesville West location been there?
Through the mayor, I don't have that information in front of me. I do know the Charlottesville West one was a renewed temporary use bylaw. I think previous to this meeting, I think 5 years ago. But I would have to review and make sure that confirm how long each has been on its property.
Okay. Oh, I know, I don't think I want the answer anymore. I just did some math. Okay. All right. Well, we tried. So, yeah, I'm in full support of this, and I'm also in support of staff doing a full policy revision on this. It's silly, and we're providing housing for people who need it, and it shouldn't be this difficult. So, is there a mover and a seconder for staff's recommendation? Moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Vanden Driesche. Any comments or debate? All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okie dokie, we are, hate to say it, jinx it, we're done. Is there anyone on the line that wanted to speak to that last file? Okay. There's still time. Okay, good. All right, with that, I'm looking for a seconder for Councillor Huffman's motion to adjourn at 3:43 p.m., seconded by Councillor Michelle. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great evening.